and welcome to this video. Now today I'm going to be doing an album review. I'm going to be taking a look at this record here, which is the new one by Paul Weller called 66. So yes, I'll just be doing the usual thing in this video, giving a bit of background information about the album, then showing you my vinyl copy of it here, and then looking at each of the album songs in detail. So this is Paul Weller's 17th solo studio album, released just last week there on the 24th of May 2024. So the album itself is titled in honour of the age that Weller turned a day after its release. But also can't help think there is also perhaps a nod to the year 1966, you know, which was a pivotal year like in the music. The year Revolver came out, and so many great kind of singles from the Kinks and the Small Faces were like at the top of the charts, like arguably the height of kind of like 60s pop kind of thing, and also of course England's famous World Cup victory as well, so perhaps it's also like a wee nod to that. So the album follows Fat Pop Volume 1, which was released in around the same time of year in 2021, so it's been 3 years since a new Weller release, which is quite a long time, you know, considering we had A Kind Revolution, True Meanings, On Sunset, and then Fat Pop all following each other in very, very quick succession. You know, this album, you know, like we had to wait, yeah, like as I said, like a 3-year period. But Weller had been busy at work though, and kind of like recording like this album, like sort of during like that period at his home studio. I think it's called Black Barn Studios. Where yeah, I think this is the studio that he's used probably since like A Kind Revolution. I think it's just his kind of comfort place where he like just feels comfortable. Like that's like, well, I mean, it must be quite an easy place like to record. Weller said like in an interview that this album, there wasn't really a particular creative impulse for this album, you know, it was kind of just like sort of back to work again, like writing songs, recording songs. That's just what he does, you know, and it just kind of fell into place quite quickly. Like he kind of gather like a couple of tracks and then just sort of like add to them like organically, rather than go out sort of thinking I need to make an album now, you know. It was kind of built up kind of song by song, and he'd actually recorded enough material during this time to release a double album. However, he said that he wasn't quite happy with the sequencing of that, and just felt that it was just simply too much material. So I think some of like the extra tracks are going to come out as bonus tracks, and I think he's also mentioned like an EP possibly later like this year. So yeah, no, like it would be good to hear like also some of the tracks like that were left off this album. So in terms of its critical response, it has been a little bit mixed for this album. Most Weller records come out normally get a fair bit of critical acclaim, and certainly I have seen a few kind of like 4-star reviews for this, but most of them have been rather middling kind of 3-star reviews. I guess a lot of the praise has come in for the album's kind of class and kind of age appropriateness, you know, like this is not a young guy, you know, this is a 66-year-old songwriter, you know, like kind of like in that the kind of latter years like of like his like career kind of thing, you know. So they've kind of like praised like it's kind of like reflective kind of mood in that, but a lot also saying this is a very safe album, you know, like if like you're familiar with Weller's last couple of releases, you're not missing much with this album, and I've seen various reviews describe it as very safe, or even like in places boring. So I want to show you my vinyl copy of it here. So this is a copy I got from Asai Records in Edinburgh, which do these lovely Obi strip exclusive ones. So it's not a Japanese pressing this, but it's just got this lovely Obi strip, a kind of hand-numbered copy of it there. Yeah, really nice. The cover itself, like it is designed by Peter Blake. As you can see, he's got his big name scrolled all over it there, and I mean a lot was made of this cover, you know. Peter Blake, he designed the Sgt. Pepper cover, he did the kind of Stanley Road collage for Paul Weller, you know. Album covers and great iconic album covers are kind of his thing, but this just feels very, very, very lazy, I'm going to be frankly honest with you. Just seems uninspired. A kind of student graphics designer could have done a as good a job as this, like if not better kind of thing. It just strikes me as being quite like an original, and certainly like one of Weller's weakest album covers, I'd say. It's probably, although to be fair, I guess he's not had a lot of good ones recently. Things like A Kind Revolution was just that plastered across the album, and same kind of thing with On Sunset. So yeah, kind of like album covers not really been the best for Weller, so I guess it kind of keeps up like that sort of trend. But the rest of the packaging is very nice though. So the back of it there just has the track listing, which is quite nice there, but the inside, it's this kind of sort of flap over kind of gatefold with the records coming out of the inside there. So it's a nod to Beatles for Sale, like the classic Beatles for Sale album, which does that, and pretty much all of Weller's solo releases follow this kind of pattern. So yeah, it's a lovely gatefold there, really nice picture like off Weller there, and then just you get quite a fair bit in here too. It's definitely one of the best packaged albums like of the year for me. So you get this here, which I first thought, well, what is this? But it's actually a full-sized poster you get with the album there, so it's very difficult to show here just sitting down, but there you get a nice big old poster of the man himself there, which is really cool. You then get a booklet here too in addition as well, which is a really nice booklet. It's got pictures in there, it's got lyrics. It's not the thickest booklet, but it just does what it needs to do, you know, lyrics, some photos in it, really nicely done, I'd say. A nice spread one there, and then more lyrics and just more credits to finish on there. So that's the book. And then the record itself with this particular copy, this is a blue vinyl pressing, which I thought was the best colour going. I think there was a few other ones. I think there was a green vinyl, which doesn't really go with the kind of album design, but the blue one is very nice. So that's the vinyl record there looked at. Okay, so I'll now go over each of the album songs in detail. I'll score each track out of 10, and then use those scores to give us a overall percentage marking for the album.
I don't care for the wishes, oh striving.
So the album kicks off with a song called Ship of Fools, which is a laid-back acoustic kind of track to kick things off, which is, I guess, a bit like uncharacteristic. Kind of previous Weller albums, things like Fat Pup kicks off with Cosmic Fringe, a very punchy, like kind of like electronic kind of track. Kind Revolution had just trying to think what that starts with, Wusi Mama, you know, like a kind of like a sort of like more heavy kind of rocker. This one here, by contrast, is very laid back, kind of like acoustic song to kick things off. Co-written with Suggs from Madness, who wrote the lyrics to this one. Apparently then kind of sent them to Weller, and then Weller kind of put this to like a tune. So Weller's kind of speculated that the track is perhaps quite political, like in like it's kind of like outlook. He sings like on it, like that man of war is a fool, I wouldn't follow him anywhere. Big, small, they all swim round their bones. I don't care for their wishes, he sings. But I guess Weller's also said that he doesn't really want to speak for Suggs and sort of speculate like what like the song like kind of like is actually like about kind of thing. Musically, it's quite nice. You've got some nice flute on it, and you've got, I think there's some vibraphone going on it like as well. It's quite nice. It just sets up the mood nicely. It's not a kind of wow sort of moment track. It's just a very gentle, easy opener to the album there. Okay, the second track up is called Flying Fish. Now this one is a much more upbeat sort of track with a kind of electronic kind of musical backing like on this one, very similar to kind of Sonic Kicks era Weller. So it's a fun song, and it's probably my favourite like on the album, like I'd say. It was the first song that they recorded for the album, and for me it really stands apart from the rest of the album, you know, just in terms of its style. There's nothing else like on this record which sort of feels like this song. Lyrically, I'm not sure what the track is about. I guess I maybe initially thought maybe like environmental issues. He sings on it like sea, like fishes in a stream, caught up in a net, trying to be free. Goes like an early verse, but then it doesn't really stay on that kind of theme. It then just kind of becomes a bit more kind of general about life, like as like the song goes on. So maybe lyrically it's maybe slightly weaker, but I think musically it's excellent, and gives a real good shot of energy to the album. Okay, next up on the album is Jumble Queen. Now, this one is actually a co-write with Noel Gallagher. I think this must be only the second song that they've wrote together. I think Echoes Around the Sun from 22 Dreams must be the only other one like they've done, what certainly springs to my mind anyway. But this one is a really good track, this one here. Apparently, Weller had the music to this one first and then sent the track to Noel, who then kind of wrote like the lyrics to it, apparently within 20 minutes. This is a song that Weller has been performing live for maybe 1 or 2 years, I'd say. You know, this has been like in like his live set. Originally was called Take, and kind of like introduced, here's my new song called Take, but then was kind of renamed Jumble Queen maybe about like a year ago, I'd say. It was one I was looking forward to hearing like on the album, though, based on these live performances. Unfortunately, though, for me, the production on this version just doesn't quite do it for me. I don't know, I was certainly like the live versions feel a bit more aggressive. They've got slightly louder guitars on it, but this one just feels a little bit limp, like in that comparison. I think the brass is a bit too prominent on this one, and there's the guitars are just not turned up loud enough for me. You know, there's a real great rocker kind of underneath this track, but it's just kind of struggling to get out like a little bit. Really reminds me a bit, it suffers from the same problem that Moving Canvas from Fat Pop did, you know, a great song live, you know, like really rocks live, but just for some reason they've just not been able to quite get it down right, like on like the studio version. But it is still a great song, very catchy. That take what you want from me line is really great, and would be a 10 out of 10 if it was just a little bit better in the kind of production / mix department.
We came together by having love.
Okay, next up on the album is called Nothing. Now, this one was another, I think this was maybe a single, or certainly I think one of the preview tracks issued from the album, and it's a pensive ballad, this one here. Again, another one co-written with Suggs, who handled the lyrics on this. Very much the vibe of this track is kind of like, I guess, by having kind of no possessions and kind of having sort of like nothing material like in like your life, that like you realise that you only need the love of like the ones that are close to you to kind of like get by, sort of thing. But for me, it just feels the way Weller sings it. He just sounds bored and dull on this one, and those lyrics, the way it kind of very much rests on the word nothing. He sings like, nothing forged our love out of nothing, because it was only by having nothing we sort of got by, and that kind of thing. It just feels a bit dull lyrically for me, and I think the most interesting bit with this is there's an interesting synthesizer solo that Weller does, but aside from that, it's just not a song that I will really see myself going back to personally. So Nothing would get a 6 out of 10.
Into pockets I go.
Okay, next up on the album is called My Best Friend's Coat. Now, this one is quite an underrated song on the album, I would say. It's kind of a French sort of style waltz, this one here, with a very unique feel, which is actually probably thanks to the fact that all the instruments on this are performed by a French group called Les Super Homrades, who got no idea where Weller finds these people from, but basically, like they co-wrote the song with Weller, and I think it's really good. It's very style cancel-y, this one here, kind of thinking like down and thinking of the song like down in the Seine kind of feel to it. Because it's got that kind of very French, kind of European sort of like kind of feel, and lyrically it's got this very heart-wrenching lyric on it, which I think was maybe kind of made up on kind of a bit of a kind of not quite like a character study, but kind of like sort of singing about sort of like someone else, or like in the shoes of someone else. He sings like, in the depths of despair I took another drink, it soothed my mind and helped me to think. It kind of goes like the lyrics. You've got Hannah Peel on here, who Weller's worked with on his last couple of albums on the string department, and she does a really great, elegant string arrangement on this one here. Certainly for me, one of the stronger tracks on the album. So My Best Friend's Coat would get a 9 out of 10. Okay, now side 1 closes on the album with a song called Rise Up Singing. Now, this one here, for me, is another song I just feel, it's a bit like Nothing, this. it feels very generic and very bland for me. Very much like the kind of, I guess the group I compare this to is the Stone Foundation, who are a band that Wellers produced. You know, they've got this very kind of laid back, kind of soulful feel. This song just feels like one of their tracks, and feels very similar to stuff on kind of other recent Weller albums. I'm thinking of things like Baptiste on On Sunset album, you know, feels very similar to that kind of song, you know, and kind of even lyrically as well. It's a kind of celebration about the kind of liberation like of music, like rise up singing to the sky, feel free rising up and high, so loud it's gonna make you cry, so glad I opened my eyes, it goes. Basic rhymes, basic lyrics. I just don't particularly care for this song personally, and yeah, it's short enough, which I think it's just clocks in like over 3 minutes. I think if it was any longer, it would probably be getting a 5 out of 10. But I'm gonna give it a 6, just because it kind of passes by, and you know, it might well grow on me like a little bit. But yeah, like as I said, this was one of the previous singles, and I must say it didn't get my heart racing for the album. Okay, next song up on the album is called I Woke Up. Now this one here is a really pleasant track, this one here, with lyrics inspired by the COVID pandemic. He sings like, I woke up and everyone had gone, not a note to say how long, so I stepped into the sun. And I must say, with kind of COVID-related songs and lockdown-related songs, I'm kind of over that now, like a little bit, you know. Like kind of like these tracks, they will probably feel very dated, like in like quite a few years' time, I think. And this one here, it's one of these. It's like a really nice song again. I think, like kind of like hiding like under the surface. You know, the melody is really, really, really strong, and the arrangement is excellent. I'd say again, you've got some great strings from Hannah Peel, but you've also got a guest star of Richard Hawley, who plays some lap steel guitar on here, which is really, really good as well. So there's a great song here, but just some of the lyrics do like, it's not like I've got a problem with them. It's just I just don't feel much of a connection like with them personally. So yeah, like I Woke Up would get an 8 out of 10. Okay, next one up on the album is called A Glimpse of You. Now this one is quite a nice kind of longing sort of track, this one here. It's quite reflective in some of its lyrics as well, that kind of taking stock. He sings like, into the gardens in blooming May, I'll find a wooden seat where I can wait till the end of the world for just a glimpse of you. And I quite like there's bits of the song that I do really like. There's a kind of change in vocal tone for the kind of chorus bit, like, and now there's no solution, I dance away bit. The way that overlaps with the kind of end of like the chorus line, like where he's kind of still singing A Glimpse of You bit, those overlap really, really nicely, I think. But aside from that, it's just a little bit forgettable, this one here. It's not doing anything new for me like on the album, very much operating in Weller's kind of comfort zone, like this song here. So yeah, that would get a 7 out of 10 for A Glimpse of You.
Good night, Sleepy Hollow.
Okay, next up on the album is called Sleepy Hollow. Now this one here is a kind of lullaby sort of song, this one here, with a kind of, yeah, quite gentle like in its kind of early verses, but then it gets a bit more intense in like the middle bit. We get different instruments coming in, some nice flutes from Jack O'Peak, who's this kind of session musician, really great stuff, and then some good backing vocals from his touring band as well. But for me, it's a very basic song. This lyrically, there's not much going on with it. He sings like "Good night, Sleepy Hollow," "Nighttime's on its way" kind of thing. You know, very much a kind of like a lullaby kind of thing, like maybe aimed at like his children. Like, I'm not sure. It's just, for me, it would be a pretty good B-side, but on an album, it just doesn't do a whole lot. So yeah, Sleepy Hollow for me would get 6 out of 10. Okay, next up is called In Full Flight. Now this one is probably on reflection my least favourite on the album. I'm giving it a 5 out of 10, which you might think it like is a bit harsh and maybe not giving this album enough of a chance perhaps to go on me, but I guess maybe getting a bit sidetracked, but usually with Weller albums I tend to really, really enjoy them like on like sort of my first couple listens, and then they tend to go down in my estimation like a little bit, or kind of like I get a bit used to them, they kind of sort of like level off. But this one is kind of, yeah, still a little bit on the underwhelming side, and it's songs like this which kind of contribute to that. It's a slow and soulful track, but you know, the first 3 songs on side 2 are all slow and relatively soulful. I just wish there was a bit more variety like on like this album, like by this point. Yeah, on this you've got some kind of a slightly more spacey production, kind of echoey kind of vocals on it, and lyrics are a little bit more political, like on this one here. He sings like, keeping faith is getting hard to do in a world where lies become the truth. But rather than sounding angry or kind of fired up about like kind of like the kind of political corruption that's kind of like in like the world, like he would have been in say the Jam or the Style Council days, on this track he just sounds resigned and a bit unbothered by it, like, you know. So I just feel that there's just something odd with this song here. It just doesn't, he just can't quite decide what he wants to do. Does he want to write a political angry song, or does he just want to do something a bit more laid back? It just doesn't, it just feels a bit like disjointed, this track for me. So yeah, like In Full Flight would overall get a 5 out of 10 from me. But then thankfully the album does get a shot of energy with the penultimate song, which is Soul Wandering. Now this was the lead-off single for the album. It's a song that he's co-wrote with Bobby Gillespie from Primal Scream, and this is a raw, again very soulful track, this one here, but you could imagine this one being on say Stanley Road or Heavy Soul, or even like Wildwood, one of his early kind of solo albums, because it's got that kind of slightly raw guitar heavy feel to it, but with these kind of gospel-y kind of influenced backing vocals on it as well. Yeah, very gritty sounding song, this one here. I do like the production on it, and the lyrics are good. They're not great. They've got this kind of reflective kind of awe-inspiring kind of feel to them. He sings like, I'm humbled by the majesty of the sea and the stars and your love. Again, it's a bit, maybe I don't quite relate to it. It just seems a bit like words for the sake of it, like a little bit. But musically, it's great. Yes, it doesn't break new ground for it, because as I said, like, you can easily imagine this like on like a 90s album. But it is a very good track. So I would give Soul Wandering a 9 out of 10. Okay, now the album closes out with a song called Burnout, which is a much slower kind of track to end things on. Very kind of almost dreary kind of sounding song this, but I think like in a little bit like in like a good way. It kind of resolves itself a little bit like by like the end. Kind of like on first listening, it really reminded me a bit of Blur's album from last year. You know, like there's kind of like some like the ballads on that album. Just in the way Weller sings it, he sounds very similar to, I guess, the way Damon Albarn would approach a song like of this kind of nature. This is another co-write on the album too, so that's the other thread going through this album, is kind of songs sort of co-written like with various like other people, which is not something Weller's really known for doing. But this one is co-written with a guy called Erlen Cooper, who Weller had first collaborated with on his True Meanings album. And this song I think is really good. Lyrically, again, it's maybe a bit of a COVID hangover kind of track, you know, with lines like empty in my own home, growing out of light, I've not seen the others, for days and months it seems, endless repetition and chaos on TV. You know, maybe those kind of feel a little bit like outdated, but does kind of like resolve itself like by like the end, like off like the song, both in terms of its kind of music, where you've got some great saxophone from like Jack O'Peak, and some again like great orchestration, which just really lifts the track up in its kind of final kind of crescendo to end the album on. And then kind of like lyrically as well, he kind of sings like, no more being lonely, I'm born again, I'm not tired of living, I'm alright, goes like kind of like the final lyric like off like the song. So I think it's quite a good closer. Again, maybe needs a bit of time to grow on me, but I'm gonna give it a 8 out of 10 though there for Burnout. Okay, so overall this album would score 75%, so I would say I think this is a relatively weak album for Paul Weller. You know, I'd say typically when one of his albums comes out, I absolutely adore it. Like, I'm listening to it a lot, and then they do tend to go down a little bit, like in my estimation. But this one has almost been the opposite. I kind of first listened to it, was a bit underwhelmed, but it's slowly starting to grow on me like a little bit. But I do think there is maybe a ceiling to that growth. I think, he does seem to be very much operating like in like his comfort zone, like on this album, you know, very much on here. Yes, he's co-writing a lot of tracks with different people, but he's also using a lot of the same players, his same touring band. You've got Steve Craddock, you've got the same drummer like Ben Cordelia, I think his name is, and again Jack O'Peak, like he was on his last 2 albums like as well. So and of course like Hannah Peel doing the strings. So there is a kind of sameness which has kind of slowly crept into Weller's music over the last couple of albums, and I guess you can safely say that that period of innovation for Weller between 22 Dreams in 2008 and say 2018 kind of True Meanings, where that was a left turn album, you know, sort of full-on acoustic orchestrated album, you know, that period of kind of constant evolution has kind of come to an end a little bit, like I would say, with each album slowly becoming more and more like the last one. But in kind of like after this album came out, I did actually revisit both On Sunset and Fat Pop, and I must say that I did both enjoy those two a lot more than this one. It's possibly a little long, like in the tooth as well. I mean, there's 12 tracks on here, and it kind of, I think the length of this like is about 45 minutes. I think if we maybe cut off 2 tracks, you know, you would have had a much tighter kind of 10 lives, or like 10-track album. I just don't think there's enough stylistic variation or even tempo variation like on this album to warrant its length. Particularly like on side 2, you know, you get kind of like 4 kind of slow sort of ballads, like one after like another, whereas I think an album like Fat Pop is more successful because it darts around from style to style, genre to genre, like as like it goes on. This one just very much settles into its groove. It's definitely more cohesive, but I think it just settles into like a very comfortable kind of middle ground, which just doesn't really do a whole lot for me. But yeah, I would be interested to know what you think of this album down below in the comments. I mean, there might be some people out there who absolutely love this, think this might be the best thing he's done in years. Yeah, but I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on that. But yeah, I hope you have enjoyed the review though, nonetheless, and I will see you all next time for the next video. Goodbye.